Welcome back to our channel, Warriors. We are still growing. If you haven't hit that subscribe button, go ahead and smash it right now. Today we have a special guest, right? We're going to do an interview with a spouse of a correctional officer, and I believe he promoted a sergeant later on, right? We're going to dive into all of that. You want to go ahead and introduce yourself with your name and where you're from, ma'am?
I am from Porterville, California, and my name is Linda Raffanan.
Where's Porterville, like Northern California?
It's about an hour east of Corcoran Prison, and it's about an hour above Bakersfield and an hour underneath Fresno.
There you go. There you go. Central Cali.
That's right.
So, how long uh were you and your husband together prior to him joining the department?
5 years.
5 years?
Yes,
Do you recall when he applied or took the test?
I remember all of that.
You want to
He,
talk about how you were feeling or your thought process on everything?
well, it was what he always dreamed was to go into law enforcement, and we both worked for the same company. And I told him, chase your dream, go for it. So he started working out and doing everything, and he made everything the first go round. He, passed the physical, the background check, all that. And then they finally gave him a go date to Galt, and he went. I wouldn't say it was in September, and it was still pretty warm. But anyway, um, it was one of the last 6 week academies that Galt offered. So he got in before it was a longer ordeal.
Well, I'm glad you bring that up. So for the viewers watching, yeah, at one point the OGs, the old school, had to go to a 6 week academy. The one I went to was a 16-week academy. So you can see the difference. Um, was that the first time you guys were separated for a long period of time?
Yes, but I noticed the changes in him day one after he started working at Corcoran Prison. I mean, he never had a foul mouth. Um, he was just one of those, uh, just a happy-go-lucky guy. Never showed emotion. My kids call him Eeyore,
So,
but
so
but
day one, you noticed some changes already.
yeah, because he started working in the shoe area, and I think he was in 4A in a gang unit, and right away, um, just there was stuff going on with other officers, and they would second watch would set third watch up to have nothing but headaches and heartaches. Their shift would be on their feet from start to finish. They had to serve in the building, so that meant lugging trays up there after they make them, and just a lot of stuff he saw. I want to say the first 6 months he saw his first staff assault, um, was a part of it, and because he was kind of a big guy, they always wanted him to go in with the shield,
Right, right.
and he really changed though in the department. He withdrew a lot towards the end because he started off as just a CO, and then he went over to C yard um, on the other side of the institution. There was A, B, and C yard. C A yard, it was half of it was shoe, and then the other one was mental health buildings,
Hmm.
and but it was still in the same design as the other one. But then when you get over to B yard, we have B. Let me see. There's five different buildings on each yard, and mine were all on the B yard. It was all what do you call it? A 260, where you can see.
270?
Yeah, you can see the whole interior of the building. There was
Right.
no. Okay, so, and then he went over to 3C, and they were trying to convert it at that time from a level 4 yard to a level 3. And so the sergeant that worked there, he went out on stress leave. So my husband, they asked him to temporarily do the sergeant's job, which he did. He got everything done. And then he finally got the regular sergeant's job at that time. And then
Nice.
about 4 years later, he took the lieutenant's exam, and he did really well on the test. And they told him, because he was doing acting lieutenant at that time, because he was the only one trained on third watch to do those 602 hearings. So they were leaving him all for him. I mean, I could tell you, he walked over the whole institution just about every day. He hit every single building, every yard, as much as he could possibly get done in a shift. Um, that's what the associate warden expected of him. Okay, and they convinced him after the first year of acting, even though he got accepted full-time positions at other institutions, he didn't take it because he really believed that, you know, they were going to take care of him because he'd been there so long. And anyway, that rolled into the second year of acting lieutenant. And again, they picked up a couple guys. They said they were still had a position for him. And then after the third year of doing an acting lieutenant's job, we were on our days off. We had the same days off. And he went fishing up in the mountains. And I got a call on my phone and it said, they needed to speak to Sergeant Raffanan. And I said, don't you mean Lieutenant Raffanan? And he said, no, Sergeant Raffanan. And I said, since when, you know? Anyway, they said I needed to have him call in or they were going to put him AWOL. And I said, well, it's his day off. They didn't even tell him that they job changed him back to a
Oh
sergeant.
man.
Right. And so he got so depressed and he just felt used, you know? And before all he got that done, though, he went and got stuck in 4B, no, 4A1 right. He got poked with a tattoo machine during a cell extraction and then they were searching the cell. And he got a poke right on the inside of his palm. And the guy, they could not tell him, even though it's in their STI file, they could not tell him because of HIPAA if
Right.
the inmate had diseases,
Right.
which crap because you got family and kids, you know, you got
Right.
your wife or significant other. So anyway, um, he told them, well, I want you guys to do some tests on him because I want to know. But in the meantime, I want to go to a facility and get some medication, you know? And they thought he was crazy, but I told him, you know, there's like a golden hour when that stuff happens.
Correct.
So he finally went and they started him off on, I can't remember, it was interferon and something. It was like a cocktail for Hep C and also for tuberculosis. So this guy was so sick from day one. He took the meds and he would, wherever he could go, he would just vomit,
Man.
vomit. He lost 65 pounds in 6 months and it was not healthy. I mean, he was sick all the time. He had no energy. When he came home, he went straight to bed and it was just a chore to get to work because he had to stop along the way and throw up. And then he found out that it's a good thing that he took that because the inmate was positive for Hep C and he had tuberculosis. And they could have cut all that drama just by, if you work in that facility, I honestly believe it's your right to know what you're dealing with, you know?
Right.
Because God forbid you have a, like AIDS, is, you know, if he had a cut on his hand and he went to handcuff somebody and he didn't have gloves on, there you go, you know?
Right.
But he was so cautious with that. Like he literally would hand out gloves at the beginning of the shift in the sergeant's office. Hey, make sure you have gloves in your belt. Make sure you got some just in case. And anyway, he was very well liked by everybody that worked with him. He never considered himself a supervisor. He was just a coworker. And it showed because like towards the end, um, all his coworkers donated their time out of their time bank. It was like $50,000.
Wow.
Yeah, and I was just shocked, floored. And there were so many people at his funeral that they were standing outside and in the overflow. But he changed so bad when he was taking those medications, we didn't even sleep in the same room because he was afraid. He used a separate bathroom. Um, he had his own separate dishes at home. You know, he
Wow.
just was that paranoid. He wanted to make sure that he did not infect any of us. He didn't even hold our granddaughter, and
Man.
she was just baby, and that was every day. That was papa time. But we've seen a lot of changes from, let's say, 2004 when they converted it. They started converting some of the kickouts from what do you call it when they're dropouts, the SNY yard.
Yeah.
Okay, so he got on that yard and he worked that one, getting the change made. And it was just really weird because then they had their own gangs over there. There was like the GBG, the Gay Boy Gangsters, and
Right.
the 125s or something like that.
Two fivers.
Yes, it was those guys, and then they also had, the Nazi low riders and all that still. But there were the yard was always calm wherever he was at. The yard was usually calm because he wasn't like the green wall did not exist. He always explained to everybody what the team was going to do, and even when we were involved in a riot, um, it all just worked out perfect because we had drills, we practiced, um, and it was medical was included, the psych techs were included, everybody that worked that facility was trained, and things were good. They were really good for the first, I don't know, 5-10 years. But when they started messing with his the lieutenant thing and his depression, I I lost him. Like, that was the end for us because he just slowly started self-medicating himself. Started off with just a beer when he got home from work. That went straight to a six pack when he got home from work. You know what I mean? And he turned into an alcoholic. This He had never even, like, maybe drink a beer or two once every 6 months, and this became an everyday thing. Well, towards the end, he started drinking the biggest bottle of um, Crown Royal you could
Man.
buy, and he would throw up. He'd drink that whole bottle in one night, and then be sick and want to start drinking again.
Right. Right.
And it devastated me because I couldn't help him. So the last 8 years of our marriage was very hard.
How long total did he serve in the department?
19 years.
19 years. And you
But he was,
meant, but he was what, man?
go ahead. He was prior military. He had
Oh,
6 years.
what branch?
Army.
Oh, awesome. So, I mean,
Yeah.
the, he sounded like a great man already. You said Army. That was just like the cherry on top right there. Um,
My son, 23rd year in the Army.
oh, nice. Awesome. No, well, thank them for their service. And yeah, thank you for being able to endure all that and be supportive through all of it. In,
There was,
what was that?
I said, there are times though when you just want to throw up your hands. And I mean, I took him to meetings drunk. I tried to get him to go to see a psychiatrist, and he's like, "No, I will lose my status
Right,
of being able to gun."
right,
And that's another thing I wanted to bring out to the other viewers is, there's so much that rides on them being able to stay employed, but they treat you like crap from the minute you get in the facility. You got people that have never worked a yard, and they are just unrealistic with what they want done. They're horrible. They call or they come over there and they just scream at your face, and you just want to. He used to call this one associate warden. He used to call her the short, angry white woman because she would come on the yard and the whole yard would just go tense. The inmates were on their best behavior. They thought something was going to kick off. But he irritated the whole process at one point because they had took the music program off C Yard where he was working, and they had no programs left over there. And so there was the all the music equipment was there. So he wrote up a proposal to a warden and asked if if they could reopen it up. He would even donate his own time, or he would get it covered so that there would be coverage for them to play their instruments out on the yard right in front of the office. And it didn't sit well with this one warden. She never worked a day on the yard. She walked
right.
straight in and she went into inmate assignments or something like that. And then she went from there. She just always circulated up. And she was the worst person you could ever deal with. She actually stole money from the facility. Her house was in foreclosure. And miraculously, the money that they sell, like chicken and pizza,
Yeah, the food sales.
then the inmates, yeah, well, all the money came up missing. But her house came out of escrow like 2 weeks later.
Sounds about right.
And yeah,
So
It's true. It's the truth.
So, me coming onto YouTube and speaking the truth, I'm sure a lot of viewers are shocked about this. I am not shocked in the slightest. This is actual normalcy in the department, especially at the higher levels of administration. It is not transparent or ethical.
Our warden was a plumber.
See what I mean?
And you know that Ron Davis, he worked at
Yeah.
our facility too before. Oh my God, he thought he was God's gift to everybody.
Well, he's
And at
not.
one function, they had like, oh God, no. We had a crab feed. And so we bought tickets and went. We had our whole table, just all of our, rowdy friends. We're having a good time. This guy gets out there and starts grinding on one of my coworkers. And she's looking at him. She's sitting in a chair. He flipped her chair around and started doing his little magic mic routine.
Mm.
And I told her, punch him in the crotch.
Yeah.
But she wouldn't do it.
You bring up
Yeah, he
something,
was a slob.
you bring up another good point. As far as being, dishonest, unethical, laundering money and facilitating stuff like that, the sexual harassment is off the charts with some of these individuals.
It is. It's really bad. We also had another. I don't even know where this guy come from, but he never worked a day really on the ground. He came in and he was in a sergeant's position from the academy because he had somebody in the higher ups, and he also brought people from the academy, and they landed Monday through Friday jobs second watch.
Of course they did.
And he told everybody, "Oh, he's my kid. That's my kid." Oh, really? Okay,
Of
but nobody's gonna
course.
give it. You see what I'm saying? So
You
when you're
know,
talking about this stuff, I can relate.
yeah, I never met you prior to this, aside from, commenting back and forth, but you are speaking my language, right? You are speaking the language of the California Department of Corrections. What really, really happens, we're not blatantly going around beating up inmates as it is alleged. It is actually the stuff is happening up above us.
It is, and like, um, just to point out how fair my husband was. Sometimes there were such bullshit write ups, the 602s. Um, he would do a coin toss with the inmate. He'd tell him, okay, this is what the book says you can get. It's like whatever, 30 days, no whatever, LWAP or whatever. And then he said, and if you pick heads or tails, and if it's the opposite, then I'm just going to give you a warning. So he would do that to the ones that were just really petty. So there was a lot of people that were inmates there that really respected him. And there was a coworker. She would go and mess up the cells, take stuff
Oh
that she
yeah.
shouldn't have, and they were about ready to get on her. They came to him and said, look, the Mac reps, you
Yeah.
got to do something with this lady, man. She's messing stuff up. So he
Right.
tried to talk to her. So she went and said he felt like he was picking on her because she was Hispanic and a female.
Oh, so for the viewers
Rap
out
fanatic.
there, and I've made some videos on this. Getting stuck with partners, not necessarily just females, because it's happened both male or female, but getting stuck with partners that will put you in a bad position by doing unnecessary cell searches in retaliation, right? I personally never did that. I'd rather confront a problem head on, straight up, right? And I did that numerous times. But yeah, they will go.
Exactly.
They will go disrespect the house, trash things, throw things around. I did not condone that. I did not like that. You do have to put out the fires for the other individual, or else it's going to get violent.
Exactly. And that happened. There was a nurse that worked over in um, 4A. That was the level 4 part of the institution. That's where most of the gang dropout our gang members were housed, the ones that were there for their full term. And this one LVN, she would just be so disrespectful. She'd
Mm.
cuss him out, call him a bitch, whatever. And so they kept warning her, and they told her, you need to stop. You need to be respectful. You don't have to call us anything but, our name. That's it. Or even by our number, but don't call us that. It's very disrespectful. And so eventually, after they went through the sergeant on that yard and they went through the lieutenant, they even spoke to the captain, and it didn't stop. So they got a hot pot and they put baby oil in there, and it had, feces and urine too. And so they had fixed their door where it wasn't shut all the way, but the light looked like it was on in the control booth or whatever. So it looked
Right.
like it was closed. And right when she came to the door, they popped the door wide open and they gasped right in her face. She got burned. But before she got her comeuppance, an elderly CO, good guy, never ever got in trouble. He was very respectful to the inmates, what they had coming. And she ran and she slammed the door between the A side and the right side and the left side. And this man was stuck there and they beat this old man pretty bad. Like he was hospitalized.
So
And
after
so the
after
next
they
time they made sure they got her.
in the same attack that they gassed her, they assaulted the old officer. Is that did I
No,
understand
right
that
before
correctly?
that, like 2 weeks
Oh,
before
two
that.
weeks before.
2 weeks before that, they did the old man 2 weeks before, and then
Okay.
she still didn't change. And
Right.
then when finally got, I'm telling you, they burned her face, and she came back to work, in the same bummy that she left. It didn't understand it. But then when I was working next door, I saw it. An inmate, they brought him in from two, and he was handcuffed in the front. And this guy got an RN who was really disrespectful. He grabbed her around the neck with us to chain the middle and our TTA. And the LVN that worked, I mean, the RN that was working there, she was known to be really short with people. And I don't know exactly what set him off, but he was able to take his handcuffs because he was cuffed in the front, and he wrapped them around her neck, pulled her under the gurney, and so he was back against the wall with the gurney over him, and he was just pounding on her. And so pepper spray wasn't really working too effectively to begin with, but eventually they did get her out of there. But she went home and her neck was bruised. She was off work for like 7 months because I guess it gave her whiplash. Plus, she had PTSD.
Right. Was he beating her with the handcuffs that were on the front?
But they should have had him cuffed. Yep, choking her too with it.
Yeah, that's
I
one of
mean,
my
he just had her,
that
and
was one of my
she
biggest
couldn't.
pet
There was
peeves.
nothing for her to do.
I've always been taught you handcuffs the inmates in the back, always 100%. And then I get over to Donovan, and it was like the handcuffing inmates in the front was like the only thing to do, and it used to drive me nuts as a supervisor because I know extremely how dangerous it is. Maybe now after watching this, maybe now they'll get the idea that hey, handcuff inmates in the back. I don't know.
And it happened a lot. I mean, um, I remember one incident over at the old Corcoran. Um, there was like I want to say there was 30 inmates who were put in those dog cages. They called them the inmate runs,
Yeah.
the little cages, and they were taking inmates out of that, but they were like unlocking further than what they had staff in front of just to make it faster. And the inmates were able to stab this one officer. They stabbed him in the head, they stabbed him in the neck. I mean, he got stabbed pretty bad. Um, and all because they were in a hurry trying to cut corners because if they didn't get things done, then it might interrupt the inmates program time, and that was all that was important to the warden
Right.
was their program time. Didn't matter what was going on, they better get that program.
Man, you definitely be understanding the inner workings of how it really is. And I'm gonna clarify for the viewers, it's not exactly a dog cage, right? I don't want nobody going up in arms. Ad segs in the back used to be big yards, right? A big area where the inmates in the
Yeah.
hole can go the recreation yard. They ended up building like
Yes.
kennel type bigger, right? Cages so that they can be individually in there or with their cellmates. So it prevented a lot of mass incidents. Can
At
you?
one point they were calling them exercise Can you hear me?
Yeah, the individual exercise modules.
Yes. And those, we only had those cages on the level 4 side. Um, and there was a lot of them. Like I actually worked over there where I did rounds and on third watch, and I would have to go check on like Charlie Manson, Sirhan when he was there. The inmate that he killed Bill Cosby's son. He is the first inmate I ever talked to that admitted that he was guilty.
Yeah.
And serious, he told his own parents in Yugoslavia
Yeah.
that just to he's don't write him. He's not going to call him. They just need to go on because he's going to live the rest of his time there. And he was very polite. It was very respectful. It was all because he was on drugs. Bill Cosby's son stopped to help him because he was broke down on the side of the road, and he ended up killing him and taking his car.
I remember hearing about
But
that.
he was really remorseful. He was really remorseful. That was the first one, I think, and the last one that I ever talked to that said, "Yeah, I'm here. I should be here
You know,
from what I did."
one of my program clerks in Donovan, he killed his own father with a baseball bat. You know, and the guy was respectful and nice. So it's just kind of weird how individuals that are capable of doing these acts are capable of being polite. You know, whether you want to call it manipulation or not, I mean, the dude was polite.
Yeah, it was. And I mean, like he never even asked for a band-aid. He never,
Right,
no, nothing. He
right.
said, "I have nothing,"
So that's interesting.
you know.
I know you mentioned
Yep.
you in the initially in our conversation. You mentioned that your husband was on third watch, and you said second watch would leave everything for them. You know, we actually have a term for that. It's called the lift program. Leave it for third, and we hated that. You
Oh
know,
God.
I don't know if you had ever heard that before.
Yep. Well, you know what else they did? They did that same ward AW that was, always griping and throwing fits.
Yeah.
She personally made it where he was put as a watch commander on first watch, and
Oh,
he just couldn't adjust to those hours.
right.
But he got held over like at least days out of the week,
Of course he did.
no matter what shift he worked.
So he was an
And he could
acting.
never get a big.
So was he
Go
doing
ahead.
first? Was he doing first watch commander as an acting lieutenant?
Yes, he did that for 2.5 years on and off.
Wow.
So he had an actual shift on third watch. It never failed to hold him over for second watch. He didn't like second watch because it's always too much drama going on. It's always when big wigs are there, and
Too many higher ups. Too many higher ups
that's
walking
why he didn't
around.
want to work. He called it too many people to stir the pot,
Correct. Correct.
or too many Indians and not enough. It was awful. Too many chiefs and not enough Indians.
Yeah,
But
you would be
yeah,
trying to run your program, and they would be like, "Here, do this, do that, do this, look into that," and you're like, "Well, shit."
yep. Or I need this report done today in 20 minutes.
Correct.
And then having him redo things for one word. That was the thing about Ron Davis. He always made it where he wanted just one word change, and he would send it back, and then he would get it back, and he would find something else to redline. He's just, why don't you just write it his own way and have him sign it?
You know, I've worked for many horrible managers like that, man, and I know exactly what you mean. Oh, I need a period here. I want a comma there. Now,
Yes.
I'm a former correctional officer, right? But in my mind, I'm a prison guard, right? I have a high school diploma. That's the
Right.
only thing that was required, right? You want me to
Mm-hmm.
keep these inmates from killing themselves and jumping over that fence? I got you, right? Like, then you got all these other people that just don't have the street smarts, the wits, the common sense, the communication skills, the ethics, the morals, and the values, and they come up with their buffoonery, is what I refer it to.
And you're exactly right. That's exactly what it is. And it's ridiculous. But they
Well,
use you until they use you up, and then you're no good to them.
and I'm glad you're saying that, ma'am. I'm glad you're saying that because I never did acting sergeant, but I did do acting lieutenant. I did do acting lieutenant, and I've seen them do some good people wrong because of the politics, because of the favoritism, because of the BS.
Yep. Well, he got under that one lady that I was telling you that got her house out of foreclosure and all that.
Yeah.
He irritated her because uh, she just she was just one of those people that you can never please. But when he offered to do something for the inmates to better it, give them something to do so there wasn't so much trouble, that's what made her angry, and that's why they kept messing him around,
You know,
and it was awful.
we did not have a backstage conversation or anything like this. We didn't plan this, but I'm almost willing to bet when you said he got under her skin, I'm pretty sure the only thing he was doing was showing her policy and procedure in black and white.
Exactly. And this is how much they use this man. You know how you have to go through and you have to do the amend all the paperwork, like the policies and procedure for an officer, what their job duties are. It has to be done every so many months or
Right.
years or whatever.
Post orders.
Yes, he ended up doing the post orders for all three shifts and all 5 yards. I mean, seriously. And he even did medicals at one point so that it could be finished so they would quit griping at him. And it wasn't just his job. He just ended up doing it all. And he was good at it, but still because he wanted to go and have this music program,
Right.
she just cut it off. And so go ahead.
I was going to say, what advice would you give to young officers with a family starting out that are putting their career in front of their family? What advice would you give from your experience?
For one thing, you got to remember where you're at when you leave that gate and you're on your way home. Take that time to just decompress, so that when you walk in the door, you're not using your CO voice anymore. Just come back as dad or your husband. You know what I mean?
Right.
But there's so many people because it's a proven fact that the minute you put on your uniform and the minute you get in the gate, your blood pressure is already is rising up when you put the uniform on,
Facts.
and it stays that way. Your heart rate even goes up until you get home. But still, the thought of going back, and it's awful. Oh, I have another good one. Okay, so this officer was working in a control booth in a building, and he started having chest pains. And he called over to our clinic, and I said, I'll be right there. Well, I called the lieutenant that was working that night. I said, hey, so and so's in building 2 on B yard, and I need to go up there. He thinks he's having a heart attack. He's sweating and his chest is hurting. I went up there. His vitals were crazy. Well, I didn't get to go upstairs. They sent an officer up there and brought him down. But when he got over to the TTA, they sent an inmate out by ambulance because he got hit in the eye with a handball instead of sitting this officer.
That sounds
The
about
man did
right.
have a heart attack,
Oh, he did have a heart attack.
and, and he was off. He did, and he was off work for 6 months, and they still was messing up with his disability. They didn't want to pay it,
That sounds about right, man. That sounds
and
about
so
right.
I I helped him fill out his paperwork, and he finally did get it. But he had a young family, and I'm gonna say he was in his 40s, but he did time in the military as well. I think he was in the Navy, but he was 20 years in the military, and then he had already like 8 years there, and the first time he ever had any kind of a heart problem. And anyway, that's another thing. Oh, I got a real good story for you in this one. Okay, so we have a friend who he's a sergeant at the time. Um, he's brittle diabetic, and when his sugars go too low, he gets really combative. Like it'll take 10 people to hold this guy down. And he made someone angry, and they held him over. Well, he had his own insulin, but he can't give himself a shot. His wife gave him all of his shots because he just can't do it. And so he got held over, and he came and he asked one of the other psych tech clinics if they could just give him the injection. I read what the doctor prescribed on it when he came and asked me. He said, Mama, I need you to give me this shot because they're holding me over and I can feel my level dropping. And so I didn't think nothing about it. Washed my hands, gave him the shot. Do you know that I got written up and they almost gave me an LOI because they called it assault on a peace officer.
No way. I'm not
Is that
surprised.
petty or what?
Yeah, I'm not surprised. And again, that just to me is a sign of retaliation against probably who you were and who your husband was. Clearly. Um,
Yep.
but petty.
And I'm telling you, petty.
So I thought of a funny story that
They're
what it wasn't really funny. The story is not funny what I'm about to say, but when I got over to Donovan,
okay.
there's an electrified fence. It's built for a reason, and it's intended for the inmate population to stay inside of the prison system. Well, there's electricians that work
Right.
on the fence and work in the panels. One of the guys got electrocuted, shocked, boom, like seriously, and it was severe. And the they put him in a golf cart and they drove him to a return to work coordinator and try to have him fill out his own workman's comp paperwork. So somebody with some brains came and said, "You guys need to call 911." And yeah, they promoted that. The one they
That happens.
promote they promoted one of those guys, I think, to associate warden. One of the guys that threw him in the golf cart, but he came up the ranks through that way. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah,
I have one more good story. Okay, so they had one of the buddies of somebody higher up. He was working and visiting up front, and there was an alarm went off, and so instead of putting everything down, he actually took the inmates uncuffed out of the visiting into the parking lot.
he no way.
Yes, he did. There was 12 inmates and their families, and they were all out front, not behind
Oh
any fence. Could have walked away, and he came back and got promoted.
man.
True story.
Now I believe the story. Now I believe though because
I'm
it seems
telling
like they promote those type of people. It's mind-boggling.
you, they,
It's,
because those are yes people. You know what I mean? They don't have no common sense. They don't. I don't know. You can't teach common sense.
you
Just
can't.
can't.
Wow. Wow. I'm impressed. I'm
Tell
impressed and relieved at the same time. Relieved I don't have to go back. But so
yes.
so you no longer work for the department?
No.
Well, that's
Thank
good.
goodness.
That's good.
For, I worked at Wasco Reception Center for a year. I was sent down there. Basically, there was a new pilot program they wanted started, and I just had to go through and make sure all of the inmates that came in on meds that they got their meds within 72 hours. And
Right.
so I stayed there a year, and then I came back to Cork. Wasco is crazy.
Oh, I bet, and especially being
That's
reception. So a lot of spouses have asked me like, "Hey, you should do a video on what can we do as spouses to help or support, show support for our loved one working behind the walls." Like, I haven't done it yet, but do you have any advice from your perspective? What worked, what didn't work?
I want to say the best thing you could do is to be supportive. Don't push. Don't you know? Keep asking questions. Let him talk about it or her talk about it when they're ready. Um, I mean, he's came home and took his clothes off in the garage and threw his clothes right into the wash machine because he had blood on him or feces or whatever. And I think the best thing you could do is just be supportive. And like I had no idea how it was until I went there. Like he tried to convince me not to go there, but I was working at a Tascadero, and that's inmates too, but
Right,
it's crazier there.
right,
We took the inmates. We were the ones that took them down.
right.
And so I said, well, it can't be anywhere. But anyway, um, be supportive. Try to understand when they come home and they're not in a very good mood. Just know it's not your fault. Um, and don't be always thinking, trying to figure out what's going on. Like when you first come on from the academy or Pico, and they just you come in and you may not go home for like one day he worked 20 hours. They had to send him home because they forgot they put him on a hospital run.
Sounds about right.
So anyway, I got to write. Yep. So I usually just made sure that he had lunch made for when he had to go back to work, and you know, just supportive, make sure his clothes were clean and ready to go, ironed, whatever. And it's hard, and they do you they come you guys become different, I think, when you work inside a facility because of everything you see, and you're traumatized. I mean, um my one of my coworkers, he's the one that found Ozuna in
Yeah.
the cell, and he had the inmates. Yeah, he and the eye, and he went out on stress. And do you know that workers' comp tried to tell him, "You're just you signed up for that. You knew what you were getting into."
That should be illegal. Say even saying that.
It should. Yes, I mean, and he was in his. He never had a easy life. He come from the streets,
Right.
and he wanted to better himself, and he just couldn't deal with it. It was very stressful, and I told him, I said, get you an attorney.
For
I
sure. For
hate
sure.
to think, but you have to protect yourself and your family. I mean, he's a breadwinner, but the worst thing you can do, I think, as a spouse of someone, is just assume that you know everything. Um, it's just hard. It's really hard to be a spouse of someone when you don't really know what it is like on the inside. You can't explain it if you've never been there. You know, you just there's so many different things that go on. Um, One time we had a murder over in Forby, and this inmate was going home, and he kept telling his cellie that this is my PTSD story too. He kept telling his cellie about his crime was he was a sex offender, and he just wanted to keep talking about it. Well, his cellie came back from a medical appointment, and this inmate was looking at his kid's picture.
Oh man.
hmm And this man beat that inmate. He threw his TV and on top of his head, and he would pick it back up and throw it down. And they kept telling him, "Stop!" They're trying to get him to prone out all that. Well, when they pulled that inmate out, his head was like a bag full of like jello, just
Right.
moving like that. We got him on Stokes leader, and there was brain matter just coming out,
Right.
and I'd never like that ever, And when my husband was a watch commander, and he had to try to make sure he identified the inmate as they're going out at the gate, and it was hard because his face looked nothing like his little tag that they have in the control, you know.
Right. Right.
So that's it's surprising. And if you don't know like that, it really bothers me. And a lot of people freeze at the sight of blood. Like I've had officers just stop moving.
Right. Right.
And one day we responded in the building. This inmate went to one of those parole hearing things, and he got bad news. He wasn't going to go home, and he had razor slash. He slashed himself from his forehead all the way down to his ankles. I mean, there was blood everywhere, and he even went so far as to just everywhere too, just to make it look worse.
Yeah.
Well, I walk in, we come running into the section, and the sergeant's just down in there looking at him. And there was razor on the floor within reach. That guy could have grabbed it and cut us. So I stepped on it. It was flat. I put my foot on it, and I said, "Hey, I've got a weapon." And they just looked at me like nobody was moving. So finally, the lieutenant made it in there, and I said, "Hey, LT, we've got a blade under my foot." Anyway, the guy ended up. It wasn't nothing real serious. He just lost some blood.
Well, that's good for you.
But
That's good that you put your foot on there. I mean, that is, proactive thinking. The right thing to do is to remove that weapon from the situation.
right,
Um,
I'll tell you another Wasco story. I
man,
was in the
keep them,
yard.
keep them coming.
Let me tell you this. Okay, we were. I was walking onto the yard, and the inmates were out to yard, and I had to pass through there to get where I was going. Anyway, the guy in the gun tower dropped his pistol
No.
on the ground as they put the yard down, and the gun was right underneath the tower, and there was an inmate like maybe 8 feet away from the gun, and I was right there too. And let me tell you, I scampered over there, right clicking in a hurry. And I said, I got a gun, I got a gun, I got a gun. And so
Ooh.
finally, somebody came and got it, but I died. And nothing happened.
Did the inmate look at the
They
gun?
covered it up. Yes, he was looking at it and looking at me like, what is she going to do? And, I'll get it before he does. I don't care. But yeah,
I'm sure that guy is running headquarters right now as we speak.
you know, oh, dang, I couldn't believe it.
um,
It's on a yard.
that was my biggest fear. That was my biggest fear. Well, I had a couple of biggest fears, right? One was having a staff member get killed on my watch. That was a major fear. Another one was having a gun on a facility. It used to drive me nuts going through how I would try to prevent that and or rectify that situation. But it happened to
I'm
you.
telling you, it was an eye opener for me. But I knew for sure I had to get the gun. But
Man, it sounds like you were an awesome partner to work with, and then that's also a good thing. People have also asked me, hey, can you talk about free staff? Can you talk about medical staff? Can you talk about psych techs? Yeah, as you guys can see, as the viewers can see, if people have common sense and communication skills, it can foster a great working environment, right? Even if we're in the worst environment.
yeah, we had a really good rapport on our yard. Um, like we celebrated every holiday. Like we'd have everybody
Nice.
bring in food. We couldn't call it a it was a food share,
Yeah,
whatever. But we all were close friends, and like every single person um, knew that they could count on us. And and my best advice to people going into the institution, just know that you are not um, the disciplinarian. You're not there to adjudicate anything. You're just there to give them what they got coming. You're just making sure they do the time that society gave them.
right.
That's it. Don't go in there thinking that it's okay to cuss at them or
Oof.
um, be disrespectful, like calling a man a bitch. That's very disrespectful.
And
And
dangerous.
I, and I warned him and I warned him and I warned him, and pretty soon, something would happen.
Right.
But to just do a job, you just have to be firm and consistent.
No, I agree, and I'm glad you brought that up. It's like, hey, um, oh, we lost her.